can get through.
Yeah, I think since the day we have started the promotion for this event, the questions have been pouring in, and people have so many questions. We have selected the top 15 commonly asked questions that Gerald is going to help us with. And if time permits, we can all open the forum, and then we can take questions from others. So Gerald, one of the top questions that we have received is, we have this role of business owner in the Agile release team. Now, we clearly know what is the role of an RT and then system architect and the product management. But a lot of people have this question around what is the focus area of business owner and how different it is from the project management. Oh. Are there any folks who found that in the art? So maybe some examples of designations that play the role of business owner.
Okay. So can I share my screen while we do this?
Sure.
I'll just bring up my desktop. So it's just easier to talk to people as we do this. So you probably see my screen now. Let me just get rid of the controls here. All right. So here's the first question. What is the focus area of the business owner? How different are they from a PM, and do they fund the other? So really there's like a couple of questions in here. So first of all, let's understand who the business owner is. If you see the framework, you see them sitting over here, right? So here they are. In fact, I'm going to, yeah. So you see them sitting here in the middle here. It's a bit weird that they're sitting over here and we don't really know who they are. But the business owner, the people that fulfill the role of the business owner, they are the people who own the development value streams up in the portfolio. So they're going to be people who work with the portfolio executives. They might even be the portfolio executives themselves.
Recorded.
So just remember that the SAFE portfolio, we organize around value. We do things differently, right? So there are no projects in SAFE. So is the business owner like a project manager? No, not in any way, shape, or form. They are someone who has the fiduciary responsibility for the outcomes of this particular development value stream, or maybe a group of development value streams. So they, as business owners, because these development value streams are implemented by Agile release trains, that means the business owner has to work with those Agile release trains, thus the product management or the solution management, in order to help those trains along to meet the strategic needs of that particular solution. So the business owner essentially is the owner of the development value streams. They work hand in hand with product management or solution management. Do they fund so this question here, do they fund the art? Not directly. So funding of the art is done, first of all, we fund the value stream. We fund the people on the value stream. So SAFE funds differently. There's no project funding here, right? We fund the number of people on the value stream. How is that funding decided? Well, we use participatory budgeting, that little PB you see in front of the pie there. This is where portfolio executives come together. They often use participatory budgeting. Try saying that one after a few drinks. It's really tough. But, they use that one. They use this all the time where groups of individuals come together. They look at the top initiatives, and they have a pile of money, and they find a way to, suggest what they think should be funded. The portfolio group then decides, based on the results of those, what they will fund. So the business owner would be probably amongst others in deciding what is to be funded after participatory budgeting is done. So a quick whirlwind. Sorry, I'm not speaking fast, but I do want to try and get through it. So some examples to play the role. Typically, you're going to look at either your portfolio executive. It might be the one down people from the portfolio executive. They need to have some kind of executive or, overall responsibility for the results in this value stream. So they may be someone who's appointed just to manage value streams. They may be someone who also has business responsibilities. It all depends on your context and your organization. In some small organizations, you might find the same people might also be playing other roles here. They might also play the role of product owner. If I've got a small train, say 50 people, I might find that my portfolio executive is also my product, in my product management role. It just depends on your context. So there's no clear answer for that one. You really just have to look. But the main thing to look for is, do they have the decision-making responsibility for the solution that development value stream is producing? Do they, they're going to be responsible for the outcomes. They're going to be responsible for helping to determine the funding. They're going to be responsible for helping to determine or removing or helping the train actually implement. Okay. So I've gone through that question fairly quick. Is that good enough to move on, or is there anything in addition to that?
Yeah, I think we can move on.
Okay. Let's take a look at the next question here. How often does a product vision change? So the product vision, so remember, we organize differently. So here's your development value stream. It's being implemented by this agile release train. That means we have a vision, which is over here on the spanning palette, right? So the vision, where is it? It's here somewhere. Oh, it's up here, right? The vision is what's controlled by product management, right? So how often does it change? Well, that depends on the type of solution you have and the type of marketplace you're in. If I'm over at LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, my vision is changing all the time. If I'm over at Boeing, then my vision is not changing that often, right? Because it's the type and the nature of the solution you're developing. So you really just have to look at the type of the solution. If it changes a lot, then you do have challenges to control the amount of churn that might occur across your PIs. But generally, there's no answer like, hey, it equals 64. There's nothing like that, right? It's going to be a context specific thing. The other part of this is, if not often. So one of the challenges you do have during PI planning is, well, how do I keep PI planning fresh if my vision doesn't change that much? And you find the teams that do get into their fifth PI planning, the product vision might just be a much shorter discussion. There may not be much change, right? But, you do need to keep an eye on that as, the business owner and others need to keep an eye. If the product vision is not changing at all over a long period of time, that might tell you something about what we're doing in terms of our exploring market needs and other things. But typically what I've seen is your first few PIs, your product vision is often a detailed discussion, but as the solution matures, as you get more stuff out into the marketplace, the product vision often just settles down. And iteration, PI over PI, you may just be talking about any new addition to the product vision or any changes. Okay to move on from that one. Okay.
Yes, please.
So this second is architecture providing the job duration during weighted shortest job first calculations, right? So there's a couple of ways you can choose to do that. So when we do weighted shortest job first, which is the prioritization method we use when implementing SAFe, you can see that weighted shortest job first is typically used here at the portfolio level. You don't see it, but it is used there. It's used at the solution train level, and it's used at the art level as well, or the program level here. It's typically an economic form of prioritization. So if you're not familiar with it, definitely go click on this article, look at what makes it up. One of the components of making the calculation for weighted shortest job first is calculating the cost of delay and then dividing that by the effort that it's going to take to deliver. And so we get this stack ranked number against our features. Cost of delay is made up of, the user business value, time criticality, opportunity enablement, and risk reward. So we look at those three things for cost of delay. And then, of course, well, how much effort is this going to take? So typically the group of people involved in doing weighted shortest job first is typically your product and solution management, maybe some stakeholders are involved in there, and your enterprise, sorry, not your enterprise architect, your system architect is typically in the room. You can typically, you will usually let the system architect will also contribute to the weightings on the cost of delay, but they also probably are the people best suited for determining the amount of effort. Some people like to bring teams up, or bring some members from a team up and use members from some of the teams to do this. But usually that takes them away from the work they're doing. So often system architect is probably the best person to help do this. The other thing you can do is over time, as you educate your product management and others, then you educate them on this, let the architect guide the discussion and let them all vote. So then it becomes a bit of an even score. So, but the tendency of most new trains is to use a system architect. Okay. So the place I was at, one of the customers I was at, we had two system architects and we used both of them initially. As a car company, but, they tended to just stick with the system architects. One was there were different kinds of architecture. I can't remember exactly what their roles were, but they both fulfilled the system architecture role. So remember, the system architect role here is not necessarily one individual. A lot of people think the roles in SAFe are just one individual. For system architecture, it's usually more than one individual because you have different kinds of architects. And same for product management. Usually you have 1 to 2 individuals that are fulfilling those roles. So yeah, system architects, definitely use them early on to do the estimating around sizing for weighted shortest job first. Okay, let's move on to this next question here. What happens if there are multiple features that have the same weighted shortest job first? Okay, so when we calculate weighted shortest job first and we calculate the stack, sometimes you get a couple of features that actually end up with the same number. And so remember, we use this because we're trying to determine which are the most important features to work on. So let's just say out of the top 20 features, we had 3 features that have the same number. Which one should we work on first? Well, then the team can just choose to make some decisions between those. They could sit down and look at the numbers for weighted shortest job first and redo the calculation, or they can just decide, can we get all the features in? Remember, we're looking for the top 10 or 15 features to come to PI planning, so it may not matter. Maybe those features will still come to PI planning regardless. So otherwise, you can just find do the recalculation, or just as a team, let them make a decision on which feature they think is more important. Some technical input can be important there because sometimes some features need to go before others. So weighted shortest job first is not always the final answer. Some teams will look at this and go, we really need this feature first, even though weighted shortest job first tells us it's not the most economically beneficial one. Sometimes the team may make decisions to override those. Okay. Who owns and maintains the Kanban and the portfolio Kanban? So nice, easy one. I like easy questions. This was an easy one. So product management, the people who are in the role here, they own and maintain the Kanban down here at the program level. So for the program backlog, right? So they own the program backlog. They are responsible for managing the program Kanban. Early on a new train, you want your release train engineer involved early on to help run that and slowly transition product management into that. If you have a new release train engineer, then the consultants or the coaches you have working on tend to fill in these roles, adding and guiding these people to how they're going to do this. At the portfolio level, typically your Epic owners are probably going to be the ones who are going to be moving things and changing things on the board, but it's usually going to be 1 or 2 of the business owners that are going to be part of the lean portfolio area, right? So remember, the same people filling this business role are the same people working up in the lean portfolio management. So typically 1 or 2 of them would probably be designated as the owners of their portfolio Kanban. Okay, there are 5 to 11 members of an agile team, 5 to 12 things. How many arts should a solution train hold? That's a good question. Again, this is a bit context that for most arts, if you get if you're getting several hundred people, like 1,000 people, then how many? If my solution train is 1,000 people, do I have 10 arts of 100 people? The practical reality is that may not work so well, right? So you have to sit down and think about how are these people going to coordinate? Where are they located? What are the challenges that are going to be faced by the tooling they've got? There's a range of things you need to think about. I don't think solution trains should actually work as 10 arts. I think if you're starting to get around those, then you probably need to think of how do I have 2 solution trains that coordinate, or some of the large companies we work with do what they have kind of solution trains of solution trains. So they have a larger solution train that's made up of solution trains, and those solution trains have a couple of arts in them, which obviously every time you get to a solution train, there's more complexity. There's more technical complexity, and there's more business complexity in coordinating what you're building and coordinating the technical stack. So I don't think there's a hard and fast answer. I think you have to ask yourself, how are the breakdowns? So for example, if you had arts that are very geographically distributed in your solution train, you may not want to have too many arts in that solution train. But what if I'm building an aircraft and I really just have no choice because I can't take a piece of the aircraft and have it sitting over there? Then I may have to. So if I go over to Lockheed Martin or Boeing, you may have 10, 12, even 15 arts sitting in a solution train. So again, the more you can do to minimize the number of arts you have, then the less complexity you're going to have, and that's probably what you want to do. Okay, now where was I? Okay. I might be able to get through all this. I think we're here, right? So, okay.
We were in question 6.
So. Yep. So an art consists of multiple agile teams. If I only need a couple of folks from compliance and from security working full time, how do we position them in the art? Okay. So with an art, remember, with the art and its teams, we want dedicated individuals, right, who are going to work full time with the train. Now, that being said, sometimes, for example, with system architects, if I have 4 or 5 architects, network, maybe infrastructure, maybe application architects, maybe I don't need them all the time. And so you might find not all the architects are full time. So you may have them, they just may be not, part-time or available at certain times. If you have specialized resources, when we go through and you do the value stream workshop, so for those of you who haven't done it, when you're going through and you're working on the value stream workshop and you're identifying your agile release trains, one of the things that we're going to do there is determine what other kind of people should we have on our agile release train. So as we look here, if I'm going through the value stream workshop, I find my operational value stream, I find my systems, I look at the people who it takes to build, design, build, and deliver those systems as a solution. Remember, this is a single solution. They're the people on my development value stream and going to be on my arts. Then I look at, well, what additional roles? If I need people from compliance, if I need people from security, I may look at them and say, okay, I need them here. Then I may position them as part of the program level up with product management, and maybe they work full-time with product management as special resources. I may position them as shared services. And I let that, I make sure that these people are available to come to PI planning or when they need them. So it really just depends on who it is you need and how long you need them for, right, to get the work done. Requires some planning. So when you're putting together the program board, it's usually good to have your shared services somewhere down on your program board so you can identify when and where you need those people during the team's PI. What else to say about that? I think that the important thing there too, when you're using shared service or others, where you can, you want them teaching the people on the train the work, their knowledge. So as much as possible, you want them to impart their knowledge to people who are on the train already as full-time people, so the train becomes more independent of external people. Okay. Okay, to keep going. Any comments there? All right. So, okay. So the CALMR approach talks about automating the entire continuous delivery. How do you automate continuous exploration? Yeah, that is tough, right? So really, when we're looking at continuous exploration, there are tools you can obviously do to automate this. Usually what we're using here is lean techniques. So we want to make sure that we're applying good lean techniques to doing the work here. Remember, this is part of the value stream. So we're, whatever tools we can use to automate this. So, your agile lifecycle management tools, collaboration tools, all of those sorts of things help to increase the efficiency of the work being done. But I will tell you now, if you haven't seen it already, you may want to start looking into, so I'm gonna go find, the new article we just released, which is now available up here, starting to talk about artificial intelligence, right? So these are the sorts of things that are really going to start to help accelerate that ability of product management and solution management to gain ideas. And we're going to start to use artificial intelligence and the tools around that space a lot more to help speed up the decision making, to help create to do predictive analysis so they can come up with better ideas. So that sort of stuff will help to empower and improve the speed with which we can move things through that very front part of the value stream, which is continuous exploration. So there's no hard and fast for that. The DevOps is well placed in the development side. There's lots of tools out there in the DevOps space and the deployment space. Not so many tools on the ideation space, right? But certainly the tools around the I'm looking at my time there. So the tools around agile management, any kind of lean tools, collaboration and communication tools are going to be the things that help you to improve that. SAFe suggests using a story that can be developed in half a day and tested in half a day as a one story point, and then find velocity. Why call it a story point when in reality it's a one minute. I'm not a fan of the way we actually go about representing this. I'm not a fan of when people say, well, a story point takes half a day to test and half a day to build, because you've just told me it takes 4 hours to test and 4 hours to build, right? If it's an 8-hour day, but a true man day is 6 hours, right? 3 hours each way on this. So I don't particularly like that. I try not to make teams think about this. I try to keep it simple. What is the simplest thing to get done here? Hours is the amount of time you spend on a story is one consideration for the team. The story's complexity. Some things can be very complex and not take very long to do. Some things can be very simple, but there's a lot of work to do. So again, the amount of hours is deceptive. And so we want to make sure that the team, when they're using story points, is thinking beyond hours of how many hours it takes. They're thinking to the complexity. How much work is it? It's only going to take me 3 hours, but it's a really complex algorithm. It's just that I'm an expert in algorithms and I know how to do it, right? It's a huge data set. It's going to take a lot of hours to get through, right? So there's just other things, how much they know about it and how much they don't know about it. So those are really the parts of what a team should be thinking about. So I tend to guide the teams away, but ultimately, no matter what you do, when teams have been working on a story for a while, what they figure out is, a simple 1-point story takes 6 hours or it takes 3 hours. They figure that out. But we want to teach them not to be thinking about hours and estimate thinking about hours, complexity, knowledge, and uncertainty. So yeah, thanks for asking that question. Whether it's safe or any of the other methods, even Scrum, right? Telling me the story takes half a day, adding in the day thing is not so. I try not to do it. I would recommend you guys try to have teams not think that way either. Okay, so we've got about, what time do we need to finish? Are we finishing at 25 after 5-minute wrap up? Is that?
Yeah, maybe another 20 minutes.
Okay, so I'll try and get through this because I want to give people time to maybe comment and talk a little bit too. So SAFe talks about intentional architecture versus emergent architecture. If architecture is fixed up front, how much design can actually emerge? So I think the thing that we want to avoid is architecture being fixed up front. There's always, for example, some architecture that's already there. What we're trying to embody is the notion that we don't want to do a big architectural design before we get started, right? So that's really what we want the Agile Release Train, the SPCs and the people in the train to understand, is that we don't want to spend days and weeks on end trying to design the hell out of the architecture. So we have this perfect architecture that's probably not going to work anyway. So really what we want to do is do enough architecture that we can move it forward. So the job of the system architects is to really look at the complexity of the systems they're building and, look far enough ahead to say, well, what architectural needs do I have that I need to make clear to the teams that we need to build? As teams are working, they may discover, things about the architecture, things that weren't thought about, and we want those things to emerge. So we really need that combination of a little intentional architecture to guide the teams to get going. And we also want to embrace the note that teams may emerge architecture. Remember, the challenge with emerging architecture is that was always thought about when one team is working. So if one team emerges the architecture, that's great. But when you've got 15 teams working together, if they all start emerging architecture, then you're going to have a real problem. Right? So this is why the role of system architect is there to help guide the teams on how to manage the architecture, but not to do the work for them. So we don't teach system architects architecture. They know architecture. We teach them how to guide the teams in this kind of working environment. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question. Okay, so we're an organization that provides staff augmentation services. So we do have verticals supporting specific domains like healthcare, banking, et cetera. How can SAFe be applied to our organization? So this is to unpack this one could be quite lengthy. So here's the challenge when you are like a provider of particular functions, right? It's like a systems integrator, and you have, let's just take healthcare, for example, and you have a healthcare vertical. The question is, are you doing this end to end? So where do you take on that work for the customer? And what do they do? So for example, if I'm going to go over to a healthcare company, are they going to be in charge of the portfolio? If I'm going to implement portfolio SAFe, they're going to be responsible for the strategic decisions. They're going to be responsible for the portfolio backlog, epics, et cetera, et cetera. Someone's going to have to teach them how to do that. However, the implementation of the Agile release trains that support their healthcare portfolio may be in the domain of your company. That's what they're paying you for. They're paying for you to look after that set of services. So what does that really mean here? Well, that means that XYZ healthcare company is in control of the portfolio. They own the development value streams, but they're asking your company to create the implementation, the Agile release train for those development value streams. The people on those development value streams may be coming all from your company. It may be coming from some of the people in their company, and maybe some external people and suppliers. So again, you have to go through the value stream workshop. In this case, take them through the value stream workshop, identify their operational value stream, identify the development value streams that you may already have to support certain solutions, because their systems may be slightly different to another healthcare company. So you want to go through this process and then figure out how your solution fits in, Are all these people coming from your company? Are you going to have to fit in people from their company, etc.? So that's really how companies like that are going to do that. But that's assuming you're controlling the entire vertical. There's another scenario there where I'm not controlling the entire vertical. I may be some part of that. So if I look at portfolio, say, for example, here, maybe my healthcare company is still in charge of the portfolio, but maybe I'm just providing the teams. So my teams are the people I have, they know SAFe, they know how to work on an agile release train. So now my essential SAFe here is a mix of implementation between that customer company and your company. So you're providing the teams. Either way, you should also be providing all the consulting service to help educate the customer, help them to implement SAFe at the portfolio level, help them to launch the trains. Then you're going to provide people to operate the trains. You might provide the release train engineer. They will provide the business owners. So you have to start figuring out where the roles are and how that works. The challenge with organizations in those situations is often the way you contract that work. So more often than not, when companies contract you in, they're going to contract you on, some kind of fixed kind of contract with certain deliverables at certain times, and then they switch over to some operational kind of contract when you're running it. So that creation contract is your problematic one, but you also have to look at that operational contract. Okay, so hopefully that provided a little bit of enough of an answer there. This is really, it's very common, but it is difficult because now you're trying to mix two parts together, what you know and what the client has to come along as well. Okay, so next one here, during inspect and adapt, the PI objectives are assigned business value and it is compared against the business value given in the PI planning. If we have not made a release, then how do we incorporate the actual customer feedback? It's a little bit difficult to decipher. So let's talk about this. During PI planning, the business owners come around and they give teams an estimate, or they give teams a number on their PI objective. That number represents not the actual business value that's going to be obtained, right? That number represents how important is that objective to those business owners. That's what that number represents. So if there's a PI objective and the business owner says that's a 2, then that objective just may not be that important. That means the team could look at the work during the iteration, and if they run into any challenges, they might deprioritize that work. If they put a 10 on the objective, that means that's really important to them. And so the team wants to ensure that they're prioritizing the work against that objective to get it through. When we get to the inspect and adapt, the business owners and other stakeholders, they've seen what you've implemented. Now they can come along and they can just give you their level of satisfaction by assigning an actual business value to that. At PI planning, they gave you a 10. Here, they might give you a 10. They might give you an 8, a 7. It just depends. And of course, they'll have to do some justification and tell you why it's less. But that doesn't mean you've released. So PI objectives are not necessarily correlated to releasing parts of the solution. They're simply correlated to, did I deliver what the product, what the business owners were really asking for as part of the work. So PI objectives are the way we connect teams and business people together for an understanding of the value that needs to be delivered, right? Moves us away from just thinking about systems and implementing functions, right? We want to implement value for the business. So that's all that really does. So it may or may not relate to something that's releasable, but that's okay because we have a roadmap and we have a release plan and, we have other things that enable us to release that work at some point in time. Okay, let me move on to the next one. Okay. Sorry, I got to read this one again. So we build products, we work that constitute hardware, firmware apart from software. Okay, right. We cannot create teams that deliver end-to-end value, but rather need to build the component-specific teams. We want to be able to capture requirements as user stories because the vendors are building new components. So I think what this is saying is that we build products that constitutes hardware and firmware apart from software. So if you are working in the kind of environment where you are going to be managing in the technology space, firmware, hardware, and software, right? So what you have to do is make sure you look at your company, you have to go back to the value stream level. And you have to say, well, what is my product? What is the value? What is the solution I produce? Who are the people that build and deliver that solution? If they're only hardware and firmware people, that's okay. Remember, this is an R&D environment. So you now might be putting people together who are now going to be working in a space where they're testing physical chips and creating, in simulators, et cetera, right? But I would urge you to say, well, should the software be part of that? Why are you excluding the software? I don't know your context, but be careful about just excluding the software because we think hardware, firmware, and software are going to be on a different part. We have lots of trains out there in the world where we have we have often a solution train, where we have arts with teams on them that are working on, the hardware pieces and the firmware pieces. They don't deliver as frequently as the software teams, but they do use environments that allow that integration to take place across that stack. So if you are working in that space, it all comes back to what's the solution you build, what's the development value stream, and who are all the people that build it. Then you have to start organizing them into agile release trains. If you're in a hardware and firmware environment, well, you're going to have a lot of labs, right? So if I go over to Porsche, Porsche have labs downstairs, where people are literally testing hardware that's being built in simulators, so they can test it against, before it goes into the vehicle. Remember, it's an R&D environment. Eventually, that chip or those pieces of firmware and hardware are a pattern and a design that are just pulled onto a manufacturing line and put into a product. So it's not the manufacturing space, right? It's the R&D space that you're working in. Okay. I hope I was able to answer that one. Maybe we can come back to that one if I haven't quite answered that. Let's get to the last one and then leave a bit of time here for discussion. So lean budgets and funding value streams make sense. I'm glad. It should make sense. Wish it made sense to more leaders. Okay. But how do you accomplish that as a services organization and the clients operate with a fixed budget? So again, when you're a services organization approaching a customer, your job is to move them. Changing the organization, you're moving them away from fixed budgeting or project budgeting, right? Or yearly budgeting cycles. Your job is to move them in that direction. So that's why, when we looking at the implementation roadmap, your job as you go through here is to train the executives so they understand the kinds of changes in the organization that they have to do. One of those changes is moving away from fixed yearly budgeting, moving away from projects, creating value streams, funding value streams with dedicated individuals who work on the agile release train. So when you ask this kind of a question, I've been in consultancy. I spent most of my life working in consultancies. Your job is to sway those executives that I'm teaching this organization. I'm going to help you teach this organization a different way of working. And with that different way of working comes a different way you treat people, a different way you fund the work, a different way you build and deliver the work, right? So that's really what you're looking. You will be successful some of the time. Sometimes you won't be successful, especially with the budgets. Budgets is not the first victory you will have when you start implementing an agile release train. People often don't get away from the project funding immediately, but they can implement a train. Sometimes clever financial people just make it look like a continuously rolling project that needs funding every 6 months. And so they have ways around it, but you ultimately want to get them to understand what a value stream is, that is a dedicated set of individuals working for a solution, and we fund that value stream. Okay. When I started this, I didn't think I'd get through all these questions, but I did. So maybe I've gone too fast. So with that, let's see what questions, maybe few quick questions from people, if you have.
Yeah, we have about 9 more minutes. Then maybe we can take 1 or 2 questions.
Yep. I've not been keeping my eye on the chat, so hopefully someone's been looking at the chat.
Yeah. So we have the last, the latest one. Brunal is asking if we have 10, 15 arts in one solution train, can we have multiple solution train engineers?
Not if it's one solution train. If you have one solution train, you are going to have, let's go here. If you have one solution train, you have one solution train engineer. Solution train engineer and release train engineer is one individual. However, remember, the solution train engineer relies on a lot of collaboration with the release train engineers, right? As the release train engineers rely on collaboration with the Scrum Masters. So just because you have a bunch of arts, remember the solution train engineer has to work closely with the release train engineers. The release train engineer is responsible for the agile release train within that solution.
You did.
Thanks.
Man, you went out 100%.
I think I was off. I think they muted me. I think they heard me. Oops.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay.
And
okay.
one more interesting question, Gerald. What we have is if there are changes to strategic teams, then what is the effect on reorganizing the value streams and art based on this change?
Sorry, could you say it again? I didn't quite hear the first part.
If the strategic themes are changing, then how do you handle its impact on reorganizing value streams and arts?
So strategic themes, as they come down from, that collaboration between the portfolios and the enterprise, they can have different effects, So when you look at the strategic theme article, you see that the impacts it often has is across, the different things. So strategic themes could cause the creation of a whole new value stream. Right. And as a result of that, maybe we stop a particular value stream or we start to sunset a value stream. It could cause the budget for that value stream to change. It could cause us to maybe decide, well, new value stream, we don't have existing teams to fill that value stream. We may now choose to take some teams from other value streams that are now getting to a more mature state. We might need to go on a big hiring campaign. So the strategic themes potentially drive what's going to be happening on existing development value streams in their arts. It also drives potentially the creation of new ones. So it really just depends on what the strategic theme is. Let's say, for example, that it's driving, a big change to an existing product. Say we're implementing artificial intelligence against one of our products. Okay, so now I might need to be looking at this. I need to, that strategic theme is going to be taken through the portfolio canvas, right? We're going to look at how and which products that strategic theme impacts. We're going to have different portfolio canvases. We're going to diverge on the portfolio canvases. We're going to converge back on those to come up with how the solution changes at the portfolio level. And then we're going to look at, well, what epics. And that's going to start to generate epics that are going to go into the portfolio Kanban. We're going to start to work those epics and we're going to start to move them through and prioritize them. Eventually, those epics may go down to existing agile release trains. But we also, when we did the portfolio vision, realized that maybe this is a new area of business and maybe we're going to create a brand new product, which means we now need to spin up a brand new value stream and potential arts, which would be a slightly longer path, comes with some different costs, but it would be launching a brand new trend. So it just depends.
Thank you. So maybe one last question, Gerald. So what would be your advice to a newly certified SAFe program consultant to start their agile transformation journey?
So I go back and look at my journeys when I think about this. And one thing I learned very quickly after I did my SPC course with Dean Leffingwell and Drew Gemolo, right? So I did this in Chicago. We were sitting in a room with 40 people and, went through leading SAFe, went through our exam, walked out of there. What I learned very quickly is that I had lots of book knowledge, but I had no experience. So as you come out, you should, it's like the backwards bike vehicle. You have knowledge, but you do not have understanding. get your hands in, get somewhere where you can start to get your hands dirty. You know, don't rush to be upfront, be in the lead, take your time, get experience, learn from others. You know, I've met a lot of consultants in my life, and sometimes their hubris of their skills, even though they've been in the consulting industry a long time in other areas, you know, sometimes that tends to run over to an area that's new and they don't know as much as they think they do. So take your time, learn, reread the framework many times, right? I look back and, you know, when I taught my first class, I also, you know, realized I need to go back and read articles again and again and again. Think about things you've done in the past and ask yourself, if I knew then what I know now, how would I have done that? So I play that game in my head where I go back and I think about something I did in the past and say, well, how would I do that differently with what I know now? And so you can build up your experience and start to think about things like that. Work together. If you're in a company, work together with a community of practice. So get a community of practice of SPCs together at your organization. Try to go and look at what other people are doing. Try to join meetup groups where you can share knowledge and talk to other SPCs. Come to events like this. Come to the SAFE Summit. You know, so come to, you know, get as much knowledge from other people as you can, but get your hands dirty. Get in there. Get a role on as a coach. Get a role on the train as a team coach. Get a role as you know, coaching and release train engineer. Get the hands dirty. Get in there.
Yep. Okay, so I think we still have a lot of questions from people. I think you know, we are running out of time. Maybe, you know, we can have another ask an SPCT session, and then, you know, I have recorded all the questions, so maybe we can have another session. But I think thank you, Gerald, again for your insightful answers. I think we covered a lot of variety of questions. Yep. So thank you again.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. I hope I was able to give enough value to everybody here to, you know, for those who are new to this, don't be afraid of it. Get in, get your hands dirty, work on this. You know, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of hard work. If you love solving problems and challenges, you're in the right place.
Good. So I think we're almost about the time. So thank you, Gerald, and thank you to all the participants for taking the time out to join this session of Safe Thursday. Please stay tuned for our next session, which is on 17th of February. And we will have an interesting surprise. So, and do visit safethursday.com.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, guys. I enjoyed the session. So it was nice to see so many people. Wow, 52 people and change, right? So that's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think with that, we are going to end the session. Again, you know, I end it with a thank you to all the participants and Gerald. So see you the next Thursday.
Good night, everybody. Stay safe, as we say. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.